The iron collar around Karga's neck felt heavier than usual as she stood at the edge of the human city that had been her prison and her home for 23 years, staring out at the wilderness that separated civilization from the frontier lands where orcs roamed free. She had saved every copper piece from her work at the tannery for 5 years to buy her freedom, and now that she held the manumission papers in her calloused green hands, she felt more terrified than liberated. "You sure about this, Karga?" Old Master Brennan had asked when she handed him the coins. "Ain't no going back once you cross into those territories. Your own kind might not even want you after all these years living with us." His words had stung because they were true. Karga barely remembered her mother's face, only the sensation of being small and frightened as human soldiers dragged her away during a raid on her village. She had been 4 years old. The memories of orcish customs, language, and traditions had faded like morning mist, replaced by human speech, human food, human ways of thinking and being. She was an orc in body only, her green skin and small tusks marking her as different in a city that merely tolerated her existence because she worked hard and kept her head down. But there was one thing Karga wanted that no amount of hard work or good behavior could earn her in human lands: a mate. A partner. Someone to build a life with. She had watched human couples walk hand in hand through market squares, had seen them build families and homes together, had witnessed the simple joy of belonging to someone who chose you. No human man would ever choose her, not with her green skin and tusks. And the few orc slaves she had encountered over the years had been either too broken by captivity or too filled with rage to consider anything resembling courtship. So Karga had made a plan. She would travel to the frontier settlements, those rough border towns where humans and orcs sometimes traded uneasily, where the rules of proper society held less sway. There, she hoped, she might find an orc man who would accept her despite her human upbringing, or perhaps even a human man desperate or open-minded enough to look past her appearance. The journey took 3 weeks on foot, following merchant roads that gradually dissolved into rutted paths, and then mere trails through increasingly wild country. Karga carried everything she owned in a canvas pack: 2 spare tunics, a blanket, a water skin, dried meat, and her precious freedom papers. She avoided other travelers when possible, camping well off the road at night. The landscape changed as she walked west. The cultivated fields and neat orchards gave way to scrubland and scattered farms. The towns grew smaller and rougher. People stared at her more openly, hands drifting to weapons. She learned to keep walking, eyes forward, projecting neither threat nor weakness. On the 21st day, she reached a settlement called Greywater Crossing, little more than a dozen buildings clustered around a ford in a shallow river. A weathered sign outside what appeared to be a trading post read, "All are welcome who trade fair." Karga doubted the sincerity of that statement, but her supplies were running low, and she needed information about where orc territories actually began. The trading post was dim inside, smelling of tobacco smoke and old leather. 3 men sat at a rough wooden table, playing cards. They looked up when Karga entered and the conversation died. The man behind the counter, middle-aged with a thick gray beard, studied her with shrewd eyes. "Help you?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "I need supplies," Karga said, hating how her voice always came out softer than she intended when she was nervous. "Dried food, salt if you have it, and information." "Got the first 2. Information depends on what you are asking." Karga set a few coins on the counter, probably more than the supplies were worth, hoping the extra would buy goodwill. "I am looking for orc settlements, peaceful ones if such things exist, places where someone like me might be able to settle. The shopkeeper gathered the coins, counted them, then selected several strips of dried venison and a small cloth bag of salt from behind the counter. Someone like you. You talk like a city orc. Where you from? Millhaven. I was freed. And now you want to go live with the wild ones. One of the card players spoke up, a lean man with suspicious eyes. What for? They will gut you soon as look at you talking the way you do. I am looking for a community, Karga said quietly, a place to belong. The shopkeeper's expression softened slightly. He jerked his thumb toward the north. 3 days walk that away. There is a trading settlement called Broken Pine. Humans and orcs both live there, more or less peaceable. They meet twice a month to trade goods, and some families have intermingled over the years. It is rough living, but they do not kill each other on sight, which is more than you can say for most places out here. Intermingled, Karga felt a flutter of hope in her chest. Mixed families, half orcs, humans married to orcs and vice versa. Like I said, it is rough and plenty of folks on both sides disapprove, but they make it work. He paused. Fair warning, though, an orc showing up alone, especially a female, you will draw attention. Might want to think about what you are walking into. Karga nodded slowly. Thank you. I will be careful. She left the trading post and spent the night camped by the river, her mind churning with possibilities and fears. Mixed families. Humans married to orcs. The very idea seemed impossible, yet the shopkeeper had spoken of it as simple fact. What would such a place look like? Would they accept her? Or would she be too orcish for the humans and too human for the orcs, belonging nowhere once again? The 3-day journey north tested Karga's endurance. The trail was barely visible in places, and she had to ford 2 streams and navigate through dense pine forest. On the second night, she heard wolves howling in the distance and slept fitfully with her back against a boulder, a heavy stick clutched in her hands. She smelled broken pine before she saw it, wood smoke and cooking meat, and the earthy scent of many bodies living close together. The settlement sprawled across a hillside in haphazard fashion, structures ranging from sturdy log cabins to hide tents to curious hybrid buildings that seemed to combine human and orcish architectural styles. A wooden palisade surrounded the core of the settlement, but it was only 8 feet high and looked more symbolic than defensive. 2 guards stood at the main gate, 1 human and 1 orc. The orc was massive, easily 7 feet tall with dark green skin and tusks that curved up from his lower jaw. He wore a patchwork of leather armor and carried an enormous axe. The human was smaller but no less intimidating, a scarred woman with a crossbow held casually in her arms. They both watched Karga approach with wary interest. "State your business," the human woman said. "I am seeking a place to settle," Karga replied, trying to project confidence she did not feel. "I was told Broken Pine welcomes both humans and orcs." "Welcomes is a strong word," the orc guard rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "We tolerate each other because the alternative is constant war, and that is bad for everyone." "You come from the human lands," Karga nodded. "I was raised in Millhaven. I was freed and I came west looking for somewhere I might belong." The 2 guards exchanged a long look, communicating something Karga could not quite read. Finally, the human woman sighed. "You can enter, but you will need to speak with the council. We do not turn anyone away without cause, but new arrivals have to be vouched for. Head to the longhouse in the center of the settlement. Ask for Nathan Whitmore. He handles introductions for newcomers." Karga passed through the gate into a world unlike anything she had experienced. The main path through Broken Pine was churned mud, lined with buildings that showed both human and orcish influences. She saw humans and orcs moving about their business, not exactly mixing but coexisting in the same space. Children played in the street, and Karga's heart clenched when she spotted several who were clearly of mixed heritage, their skin tones ranging from pale tan to light green, their features a blend of both races. The longhouse dominated the center of the settlement, a massive structure built from whole logs with a sod roof. Smoke rose from holes along the ridgeline. Karga pushed open the heavy door and stepped into warmth and noise. The interior was crowded with tables and benches. Dozens of people were eating what appeared to be a communal meal, the noise of conversation and laughter almost overwhelming. At the far end of the hall, a man stood talking to a mixed group of humans and orcs, gesturing with his hands as he made some point. He was tall for a human, broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back in a short tail and a close-cropped beard. He wore practical clothing, leather breeches and a wool shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms. Karga made her way toward him, feeling eyes tracking her progress. The conversations did not stop, but she felt the weight of attention. The man noticed her approaching and broke off his discussion, turning to face her fully. His eyes were a startling gray-blue, and his expression was open and curious rather than hostile. "Can I help you?" "I am looking for Nathan Whitmore," Karga said. "You found him." He offered a slight smile. "And you are?" "Karga, I just arrived. The guard said I should speak with you about settling here." Nathan studied her for a moment, then nodded to the people he had been speaking with. "Excuse me, we will continue this later." He gestured for Karga to follow him to a quieter corner of the longhouse where they could speak without shouting. "So, Karga," Nathan said, settling onto a bench and indicating she should sit across from him, "tell me your story. Where are you from, and what brings you to Broken Pine?" There was something about his direct but gentle manner that made Karga want to trust him. She sat and began to speak, the words coming easier than she expected. She told him about being taken as a child, about growing up enslaved in Millhaven, about saving for years to buy her freedom. She explained her hope of finding a community where she might belong, might even find a mate and build a life. Nathan listened without interrupting, his full attention on her in a way that felt both unnerving and strangely comforting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. "Broken Pine is not paradise," he said finally. "We have managed to build something here, a place where humans and orcs can live side by side, but it takes constant work. There is prejudice on both sides. Some of the orc clans think we are traitors for dealing peacefully with humans. Some of the human settlements think we are collaborating with monsters. And here in the settlement itself, there is tension. Not everyone approves of mixed couples or half-orc children. But they exist," Karga said softly. "I saw them, the children. They do." Nathan's expression warmed slightly. "They exist, and they are proof that different peoples can build bridges instead of walls. My own wife was an orc, was." The past tense struck Karga like a blow. "What happened to her?" Pain flickered across Nathan's face. "She died in childbirth 3 years ago. Our daughter lived, thankfully. Nessa is healthy and strong and the light of my life. But I lost the woman I loved." "I am sorry," Karga said, meaning it deeply. Nathan shook his head. "It is the nature of life to contain both joy and sorrow. Talia gave me 3 good years and a daughter. I cannot regret that." He straightened, visibly pulling himself back to the present. "The point is, yes, you can settle here. We have a few empty cabins on the eastern edge of the settlement. You would need to contribute to the community, do your share of work. Can you read and write?" "Yes. I was taught by the master's wife, and I worked in a tannery for many years. I know leatherwork." "Useful skill. We can always use another leatherworker. The cabin needs repairs, but I can assign some people to help you get it livable. In the meantime, you can stay in the longhouse. We have sleeping quarters in the back for travelers and new arrivals. It was happening too fast. Karga felt dizzy with the speed of it, the simple acceptance. That is it. I can just stay. Unless you give us reason to cast you out, yes. We do not turn away people looking for a new start. Nathan stood and extended his hand. After a moment, Karga took it, and they shook in the human custom she had learned long ago. His grip was firm and warm, his palm calloused from hard work. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Nathan was true to his word, assigning 2 young men to help Karga repair the cabin that would be her home. It was a simple structure, one room with a stone fireplace, wooden shutters over the windows, and a loft for sleeping. The roof had several gaps that needed patching, and the door hung crooked on its hinges, but it was sound enough otherwise. Karga threw herself into the work with determined energy. The 2 young men helping her, brothers named Tom and Jacob, were polite enough though clearly uncertain how to interact with her. She learned quickly that the best approach was to simply focus on the task at hand and let them grow accustomed to her presence. On the 3rd day, Nathan came by to check on the progress, bringing his daughter Nessa with him. The little girl was perhaps 3 years old, with dark hair like her father and skin that was a soft sage green. Her ears had slight points, and when she smiled, Karga could see the tiniest bumps where tusks might grow in years to come. "It is looking good," Nathan said, examining the new thatch on the roof. "You all have done solid work." Nessa clutched her father's hand, peering at Karga with wide brown eyes. Then, in the unpredictable way of children, she let go of Nathan and walked directly up to Karga, tilting her head back to look up at her. "You are green like Mama was," Nessa announced. Karga's throat tightened. She knelt down to be at the child's eye level. "I am. Did your mama have tusks like mine?" Nessa nodded seriously. "Bigger, though. She could make funny sounds with them. Papa says I might have them too when I am bigger." "I am sure they will be beautiful," Karga said softly. "Do you know how to make funny sounds?" "I am afraid not. I never learned." This seemed to disappoint Nessa, but only briefly. "Papa, can Karga come to dinner tonight? We are having stew." Nathan looked slightly embarrassed. "Nessa, you cannot just invite people without asking me first." "But I am asking you," Nessa said with perfect 3-year-old logic. Despite himself, Nathan smiled. He looked at Karga with an expression that might have been apologetic. "You are welcome to join us if you would like. It is just simple fare. Nothing fancy." Karga felt she should refuse, should not impose, but the thought of eating alone in her still unfinished cabin versus sharing a meal with this kind man and his charming daughter made the choice easy. "I would like that. Thank you." Nathan's home was a well-built cabin larger than Karga's, with 2 rooms and a covered porch. The interior was tidy but clearly lived in, with Nessa's toys scattered in one corner and a basket of mending beside the fireplace. The stew was indeed simple, root vegetables and rabbit in a savory broth, but it was hot and filling. Nessa chattered throughout the meal, telling Karga about her friends and her favorite games and the garden she was helping Papa plant. Nathan interjected occasionally to correct some exaggeration or redirect the conversation, his affection for his daughter obvious in every word and gesture. "You have children?" Nessa asked Karga at one point, with a child's complete lack of filter. "No," Karga said, feeling the old ache of loneliness. "I do not." "Do you want some? Papa says that is how it works. You have to want them first." "Nessa," Nathan said, a note of warning in his voice. "What? That is what you told me." "Yes, but that is a very personal question, and we do not ask personal questions of people we have just met." Nessa considered this seriously, then looked at Karga. "Sorry, Papa says I am too nosy sometimes." "It is all right," Karga assured her. "And yes, I would like children someday. If I am fortunate enough to find a partner who wants to build a family with me." After dinner, Karga helped Nathan clean up despite his protests. As she washed bowls in the basin, she found herself acutely aware of his presence moving around the small cabin, of the easy domesticity of the moment. It had been so long since she had felt even the echo of what a home could be. "Thank you for the meal," she said as she prepared to leave. "It was kind of you." "You are welcome here anytime," Nathan said, and Karga believed he meant it. She walked back to her cabin through the darkening settlement, her mind full of thoughts she barely dared to examine. Nathan was handsome, yes, and clearly kind, but he was also grieving and had a child to care for. The last thing he would want was some homeless orc woman complicating his life. And yet, she could not help but notice the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the gentle competence of his hands as he worked, or the patient tenderness he showed his daughter. She was being foolish. She had been in Broken Pine less than a week. She needed to focus on establishing herself, on learning the rhythms of the settlement, on finding her place in the community. But late that night, lying in her bedroll in the drafty cabin, Karga allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to share her life with someone like Nathan, to help raise a child like Nessa, to belong to a family instead of always being alone. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Karga spent her days working on her cabin and beginning to set up a leatherworking station in one corner. Word spread that she was skilled, and people began bringing her small jobs. A torn harness that needed mending, new laces for boots, a request for a belt. She charged fair prices and did good work, and gradually, people began to accept her presence. Nathan stopped by every few days, sometimes with Nessa, sometimes alone. He would check on her progress, bring news from the settlement council, or simply sit on her porch and talk. Karga found herself looking forward to these visits with an intensity that both pleased and frightened her. One evening, nearly a month after Karga's arrival, Nathan appeared at her door looking troubled. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Karga stepped aside, suddenly worried. "What is wrong?" Nathan sat heavily on the stool by her workbench, running his hands through his hair in what Karga had learned was a gesture of stress. "We have a problem. A group of orc raiders hit a farmstead about 10 miles south of here. Killed the family, burned the buildings, took the livestock. The humans in Broken Pine are angry and afraid, and some of them are calling for retaliation against the orc families here." Karga's stomach dropped. "That is insane. The orcs here had nothing to do with a raid." "I know that, you know that, but fear makes people stupid." Nathan looked at her, his eyes troubled. "I am trying to keep things calm, but there is going to be a meeting tomorrow night. Both communities. It could get ugly." "What can I do?" Nathan seemed surprised by the question. "You have only been here a month." "You do not need to involve yourself in settlement politics." "This settlement has given me a home when I had none," Karga said firmly. "If I can help prevent bloodshed, I want to try." Nathan studied her for a long moment, something like respect warming his expression. "All right. Come to the meeting. Be visible. Show them that not all orcs are raiders, that some orcs value peace as much as any human. Your presence might help remind people that we are all individuals, not just representatives of our races." The meeting was held in the longhouse the following evening, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Nearly every adult in Broken Pine was present. Humans clustered on one side of the hall and orcs on the other, with a few mixed families looking uncomfortable in the middle. Nathan stood at the center, trying to maintain order as angry voices rose from both sides. A human farmer demanded retribution. An orc warrior insisted his people had nothing to do with the raids and should not be punished for the actions of a rogue clan. Arguments erupted, voices escalating. Karga sat with the mixed families, feeling the weight of hostile stares from some of the orcs who saw her as too human and suspicious glances from humans who saw only her green skin. She kept her expression calm, her posture non-threatening, trying to be a living example of Nathan's point about individuals versus groups. Enough. Nathan's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with authority. We are not going to solve anything by shouting at each other. We built this settlement on the principle that we could be better than the endless cycle of raid and retaliation. If we abandon that now, we might as well burn Broken Pine ourselves and go back to killing each other in the wilderness. Easy for you to say, a human man shouted. Your wife is already dead. The rest of us still have families to protect. The room went silent. Nathan's face went very still, and Karga saw his hands clench into fists. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but edged with steel. My wife died bringing my daughter into this world. Do not speak of her to me in that tone, and do not presume that because I have already lost someone I love, I have no stake in protecting this community. Nessa is half orc. Do you think for 1 second that I would tolerate anything that put her at risk? The human man had the grace to look ashamed. An orc woman stood up on the other side of the hall. Karga recognized her as Greca, one of the senior members of the orc community. Nathan speaks wisdom. The raiders were from the Blood Moon clan, far to the north. They do not honor the agreements we have made here. But if we allow fear to break the peace we have built, we give them victory even without them striking at Broken Pine directly. Slowly, grudgingly, the voices of reason began to prevail. Nathan proposed increased patrols, mixed groups of humans and orcs working together to watch the approaches to the settlement. He suggested sending envoys to the nearest human towns and orc clans to explain the situation and reaffirm Broken Pine's commitment to peace. He reminded everyone that their strength lay in their unity, in being the one place where cooperation had replaced conflict. It took hours, but eventually, the settlement reached a consensus. There would be no retribution against the innocent. There would be increased vigilance. And there would be a renewed effort to show both the human and orc communities in the region that Broken Pine represented a better path forward. As people filed out of the longhouse, exhausted and emotionally drained, Nathan caught Karga's eye and gave her a small nod of thanks. She had not needed to speak at the meeting, but her presence, her calm demonstration that an orc could be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, had mattered. She was walking back to her cabin when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Nathan approaching through the darkness. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said. "It helped more than you might realize." "I did nothing," Karga protested. "You were there. You showed them that we are all just people trying to make our way in the world." Nathan paused, then continued more quietly. "I meant what I said in there, about Nessa. She is my whole world. Everything I do is about trying to build a future where she can grow up safe and accepted, where being half-orc does not make her a target for hate from either side." "You are a good father," Karga said softly. "She is lucky to have you. I am the lucky one." Nathan looked at Karga, his expression difficult to read in the moonlight. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret coming here?" "It has not been the peaceful new start you probably hoped for." Karga thought about the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "In the human city I was tolerated but never accepted. Here I am part of something larger. I have a purpose. I have people who count on me, even if only in small ways. That is worth more than a peaceful but lonely existence." Nathan smiled, and Karga felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I am glad you came to Broken Pine, Karga. Very glad." He left then, heading back to his cabin and his daughter, and Karga continued to her own small home. But she carried his words with her like a treasured gift. The increased patrols began the next day, and Nathan asked Karga if she would be willing to join one of the mixed teams. She agreed immediately. The work was grueling, long days of walking the forest trails around the settlement, watching for signs of raiders or trouble. But it also gave her the chance to earn the trust of both humans and orcs who might otherwise have remained suspicious of her. Her patrol partner was a young human man named Nolan Webb, a hunter who knew the forest better than anyone. He was quiet and initially wary, but as they spent days together moving through the wilderness, he began to open up. He taught her tracking skills, how to read broken branches and disturbed soil, how to move silently through the underbrush. "You learn quick," Nolan commented after Karga successfully identified the trail of a deer. "I had a good teacher," Karga replied. One afternoon, 2 weeks into the patrol rotation, they came across signs that made Nolan's expression turn grim. Deep gouges in the bark of trees, ground churned up by many feet, the remains of a campfire. "Orc war party," Nolan said quietly. "Maybe a dozen strong from the look of it. They passed through here too, maybe 3 days ago." "Heading toward Broken Pine?" Karga asked, her hand instinctively going to the knife at her belt. "No, looks like they were moving east to west, probably the same Blood Moon raiders." Nolan knelt to examine the tracks more closely. "We need to report this." They hurried back to the settlement and went directly to Nathan. He listened to their report with a serious expression, then called together the patrol leaders to share the information and adjust their watch patterns. That evening, Karga found herself once again at Nathan's cabin, this time because he had invited her and several others to discuss strategy over dinner. Nessa was already asleep in the loft, and the adults sat around Nathan's table, speaking in low voices about sight lines and warning systems and evacuation plans. Karga contributed what she could, drawing on her knowledge of how the human city guard had organized their watches. Nathan listened to everyone's input, synthesizing it into a coherent plan. Watching him work, Karga was struck by his natural leadership, the way he managed to make everyone feel heard while still keeping the discussion focused and productive. When the others left, Karga lingered behind, helping Nathan clean up the dishes from dinner. "You are good at this," she said. "Leading people, making them believe things can be better." Nathan shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "I just try to see the best in everyone." Most people want the same things: safety for their families, food on the table, a chance at happiness. When you remember that, it is easier to find common ground. "Is that how you came to marry an orc?" Karga asked, then immediately wished she could take the words back. "I am sorry." That was too personal. But Nathan did not seem offended. He dried the last bowl and set it aside, then leaned against the counter, his expression distant with memory. "I met Talia during a trade negotiation. She was representing her clan and I was representing Broken Pine. We were supposed to be adversaries, but I kept noticing little things about her. The way she argued fiercely for her people but always looked for compromise. The way she listened more than she spoke. The kindness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching." He smiled, lost in the past. "We started finding excuses to meet outside the formal negotiations, just to talk, to learn about each other. And somewhere along the way I fell in love with her. It was not easy. Her clan initially refused to accept our relationship. My own family back east disowned me when I told them I was marrying an orc, but we did not care. We had each other and that was enough." "You must miss her terribly," Karga said softly. "Every day." "But I also see her in Nessa, in the settlement we are building together, in every small act of understanding between human and orc. Talia believed Broken Pine could be a beacon, proof that our peoples did not have to be enemies. I try to honor that belief in everything I do." Karga felt tears prick her eyes. She chose well. Her daughter is fortunate, and so is this settlement. Nathan looked at Karga then, really looked at her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "You remind me of her sometimes. That same fierce determination to find a place to belong. That same courage to keep hoping even when everything seems stacked against you." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Nathan cleared his throat and stepped back, breaking the spell. "It is late. Let me walk you home." They walked through the quiet settlement together, their shoulders almost touching. At Karga's door, Nathan bid her good night, but his hand lingered on her arm for just a moment longer than necessary, his touch warm even through her sleeve. After he left, Karga sat on her porch and stared up at the stars, her heart racing. She was falling for him. It was foolish, dangerous, setting herself up for heartbreak. Nathan was still grieving his wife, still focused entirely on his daughter and his responsibilities. And even if he could see her as something more than a friend, what kind of future could they have? A human man and an orc woman who had never truly been part of either world. But foolish or not, dangerous or not, her heart did not seem to care about logic. She wanted him. Wanted his kindness and his strength and the gentle way he moved through the world. Wanted to help raise Nessa, to build something lasting with this man who saw people rather than races. She just had no idea if he could ever feel the same way about her. The next few weeks brought a subtle shift in the dynamic between Karga and Nathan. They continued to see each other regularly, their friendship deepening into something more comfortable and familiar. Nathan brought Nessa to visit Karga's workshop, and the little girl delighted in playing with scraps of leather while Karga worked. Karga sometimes joined them for dinner, and Nathan occasionally stopped by her cabin just to talk. But there was also a tension now, a awareness that crackled in the air when their hands accidentally brushed, or when they caught each other's eyes across a crowded room. Karga tried to ignore it, to focus on building her life and contributing to the community, but it was always there, simmering beneath the surface. Then came the day that changed everything. Karga was working in her shop when she heard shouting from the direction of the settlement gate. She dropped the belt she was tooling and ran outside, joining the stream of people rushing toward the commotion. A patrol had returned, carrying a wounded man on a makeshift stretcher. Blood soaked through the bandages wrapped around his torso, and his face was gray with pain and blood loss. Karga recognized him as one of the hunters, a man named Marcus. "Raiders ambushed them," someone was explaining to the growing crowd. "Killed 2 of our people outright. Marcus barely escaped." Nathan pushed through the crowd, his face set in grim lines. "Get him to the healer. Now." Everyone else, clear the way. As people rushed to help the wounded man, Nathan called the patrol leaders together. Karga found herself included in that group, pulled in by Nathan's urgent gesture. They gathered in the longhouse, away from the panicking crowd. "This is escalating," Nathan said without preamble. "The raids are getting bolder, closer to our borders. We need to do something." "Like what?" An orc warrior named Throck demanded. "We cannot fight the Blood Moon clan. They are too numerous and too vicious." "We could appeal to the regional governor," a human woman suggested. "Ask for military support." Nathan shook his head. "By the time we sent a message and got a response, weeks would pass. The raiders would have done their damage and moved on. We need a more immediate solution." "We could send an embassy to the Blood Moon clan," Karga heard herself saying. Everyone turned to look at her, and she fought the urge to shrink back. "Offer them trade goods, negotiate a peace. It might not work, but it could buy us time." "They will kill any envoy we send," Throck said flatly. "The Blood Moon clan does not negotiate. They raid and conquer. That is their way." Then we make them an offer they cannot refuse, Karga insisted. Food, tools, things they need for the coming winter. Raiders strike because they need resources. If we provide those resources in exchange for peace, we remove their motivation. Nathan was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. It is risky. Even if we send a well-supplied embassy, there is no guarantee they would not just take the goods and kill our people anyway. I will go, Karga said. The words were out before she fully thought them through, but once spoken, she did not take them back. I am an orc. I speak the old language at least a little. They might be more willing to listen to me than to a human. Absolutely not, Nathan said sharply. It is too dangerous. Everything is dangerous right now, Karga shot back. If we do nothing, more people will die. I am willing to take the risk. The debate raged for hours, but eventually Karga's proposal won out, largely because no one could offer a better alternative. It was decided that she would lead a small embassy to the Blood Moon clan territory, accompanied by 2 volunteers who would help carry trade goods and provide additional security. Nathan fought against the plan until the very end, but when it became clear he was outvoted, he pulled Karga aside. This is madness, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. You could die. People are already dying, Karga replied gently. If I can stop that, I have to try. Why, you have been here barely 2 months. Broken Pine is not your responsibility. It is my home. These are my people now, both the humans and the orcs. Karga met his eyes steadily. And there are people here I care about, people I want to protect. Nathan's jaw clenched. For a moment, Karga thought he might forbid her to go, might try to use his authority as a settlement leader to keep her safe. But instead, he just nodded slowly. When you come back, he said quietly, we need to talk. Really talk. When I come back, Karga agreed, her heart skipping at the intensity in his eyes. She left 2 days later, accompanied by Nalen Webb and an orc warrior named Grok. They carried packs heavy with trade goods, iron tools, preserved food, woolen blankets, and a small chest of mixed coins. The journey to Blood Moon territory would take at least a week on foot, longer if they wanted to move cautiously and avoid detection by hostile patrols. The first few days passed uneventfully. They traveled through dense forest, following game trails and keeping watch for any signs of raiders. Nalen's tracking skills proved invaluable, helping them avoid several areas where orc war parties had recently passed through. On the 4th night, as they sat around a small, carefully shielded campfire, Grok spoke up for the first time in hours. You are very brave, he said to Karga. Or very foolish, perhaps both. Karga smiled faintly. Probably both, but I could not stand by and do nothing. You care for the human, Nathan. It was not a question. Karga glanced at Nalen, but the hunter was tactfully checking his gear and pretending not to listen. Yes, she admitted quietly. I care for him and for his daughter, for all of them. Grok nodded slowly. In my clan, before I came to Broken Pine, we would have killed you for such feelings. Caring for humans was seen as weakness, betrayal. But I have lived among them now for 3 years, and I have learned something important. The heart does not care about the boundaries we draw between peoples. It wants what it wants. Does that not make you sad? Karga asked. To have left your clan behind? Sometimes. But I have found a new clan in Broken Pine, a chosen family rather than a blood one. That has its own strength. Grok poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks drifting into the night sky. I hope you survive this foolish mission. Nathan has been alone too long. He deserves happiness again. They reached the edge of Blood Moon territory 2 days later, marked by tall poles topped with skulls, both animal and humanoid. Karga felt her stomach clench but forced herself to keep moving forward. They had come too far to turn back now. They were spotted within an hour. A patrol of orc warriors melted out of the forest, surrounding them with weapons drawn. These orcs were different from those in Broken Pine, their armor more elaborate, their faces painted with red and black markings. The leader, a massive orc with scars crisscrossing his face, looked at them with open contempt. "You trespass in Blood Moon territory," he growled in the orcish tongue. "Give me one reason not to kill you where you stand." Karga stepped forward, raising her hands to show she held no weapon. "I come bearing gifts and a proposal for peace," she said in halting orcish, hoping her accent was not too terrible. "I represent the settlement of Broken Pine. We wish to avoid conflict." The leader's eyes narrowed. Broken Pine, the place where orcs lie with humans like animals. "I should kill you just for that." "You could," Karga agreed calmly. "But then you would miss the opportunity to see what we have brought. Food, tools, goods that could help your clan survive the coming winter. All we ask in return is that you leave Broken Pine and its people in peace." The leader considered this, then gestured sharply. "You will come to our camp. The chieftain will decide your fate." They were marched through the forest for several hours, eventually arriving at a large encampment. Dozens of hide tents circled a central fire pit, and everywhere Karga looked, she saw warriors and their families. This was not a raiding party, but an entire mobile clan. They were brought before an elderly orc female who sat on a throne made of bones and furs. Her skin was darker green than Karga's, her tusks filed to sharp points, and her eyes held the weight of decades of hardship and warfare. "So," the chieftain said in a voice like gravel, "the human lovers send an envoy. Speak your piece and speak quickly. My patience is limited." Karga bowed respectfully, then straightened and began to make her case. She spoke of Broken Pine, of the peace they had built, of the benefits of trade over raiding. She had the packs opened, showing the quality of the goods they offered. She argued that cooperation could bring more prosperity than conflict. The chieftain listened without expression. When Karga finished, the old orc was silent for a long moment. "You speak well for one raised among humans," she said finally, "but you understand nothing of our ways. We are Blood Moon. We do not beg for scraps from those who would enslave us. We take what we need and we bow to no one." "I am not asking you to bow," Karga said desperately. "I am asking you to trade, to build something better for both our peoples. Better." The chieftain spat the word like a curse. "You think living among humans, bearing their children, adopting their weak customs is better. You dishonor everything it means to be an orc. I think peace is better than endless war. I think cooperation is better than constant struggle. And I think children who can grow up safe are better than children who grow up knowing only violence." The chieftain stood slowly, towering over Karga. "You are no orc. You are a human in an orc skin. I should have you executed as an example." Karga forced herself to stand firm, even as fear clawed at her throat. "Then execute me. But let my companions take the trade goods and the message of peace back to Broken Pine. Prove that Blood Moon has honor, even if you reject our offer." For a terrible moment, Karga thought the chieftain would order her death. Then, shockingly, the old orc began to laugh, a harsh sound like breaking stone. "You have courage, I will grant you that. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." She sat back down, waving a dismissive hand. "Take your goods and go. I will not raid Broken Pine this season. But not because of your pretty words or your bribes. I will leave you in peace because you amuse me, and because watching your doomed experiment fail slowly will be more entertaining than simply crushing it." It was not the agreement Karga had hoped for, but it was something. She bowed again, deeply. "Thank you, chieftain. Your mercy is appreciated. Do not thank me yet. Winter will be harsh, and come spring my warriors will be hungry again. Your precious settlement may not seem so amusing then." The chieftain gestured to her guards. "Escort them to the border. If they return, kill them." The journey back to Broken Pine felt longer than the journey out, perhaps because Karga could not stop thinking about the chieftain's words. She had bought them time, a single season of peace, but the fundamental problem remained unsolved. The Blood Moon clan saw humans as enemies and settlements like Broken Pine as betrayals of orcish culture. How could that mindset ever truly change? Nolan seemed to sense her dark thoughts. As they made camp one evening, he sat down beside her. "You did good back there. You kept your head, made the best deal you could. No one could have done better." "I bought us a few months at most," Karga said bitterly, "and even that was more luck than skill. If the chieftain had been in a different mood, we would all be dead. Maybe. But a few months gives us time to prepare, to strengthen our defenses, to reach out to other clans and other settlements. You gave Nathan options he did not have before. That matters." Grok grunted agreement from where he sat sharpening his axe. "The young human speaks truth. You achieved what you set out to achieve. Be proud." Karga tried to take their words to heart, but the weight of responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders. She had promised to protect Broken Pine, to help build a better future. But what if the chieftain was right? What if their experiment was doomed from the start? They reached Broken Pine 8 days after leaving the Blood Moon encampment. Word of their return spread quickly, and by the time they reached the settlement gate, a crowd had gathered. Karga gave her report to the assembled council, explaining both the temporary peace she had secured and the tenuous nature of that peace. Nathan listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he thanked her formally, then dismissed the council. But as people began to disperse, he caught her arm. "I need to see you," he said quietly. "Tonight, please." Karga nodded, her heart suddenly pounding. "Where?" "My cabin, after Nessa is asleep." The hours until nightfall felt like days. Karga tried to busy herself, unpacking her gear, checking on her workshop, but her mind kept circling back to Nathan's intense expression, to his words before she left. "We need to talk. Really talk." What did he want to say? Was he angry with her for taking such a risk? Grateful? Did he want to discuss settlement business? Or was this about something more personal? When full dark fell, Karga made her way to Nathan's cabin. Light glowed in the windows, and she could hear the murmur of Nathan's voice, probably reading Nessa a bedtime story. She waited on the porch, not wanting to interrupt. Finally, the door opened. Nathan stood silhouetted against the firelight, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Come in," Nathan said softly. Karga entered the cabin, acutely aware of the intimacy of the space. Nessa was asleep in the loft, her gentle breathing the only sound other than the crackle of the fire. Nathan closed the door and gestured to the chairs by the hearth. "I am glad you are back safe," he said once they were seated. "When you left, I could not sleep for 3 nights. I kept imagining all the ways it could go wrong. I am sorry I worried you. Do not be sorry. What you did was incredibly brave, but it also made me realize something." Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on hers. "When I thought about you dying, about never seeing you again, I felt something I have not felt in 3 years. Terror at the thought of losing someone I care deeply about." Karga's breath caught. "Nathan, let me finish." "Please." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with his words. "After Talia died, I told myself I would never fall in love again. It hurt too much to lose her, and I had Nessa to think about. I could not risk that kind of pain again, could not risk Nessa losing another parent figure if something went wrong." He stood and began to pace, agitation clear in every movement. But then you came to Broken Pine. And at first, I thought you were just someone who needed help, someone I could assist in finding her place here. But the more time I spent with you, the more I saw your strength, your kindness, your determination to build something good despite everything you have been through. And I started to feel things I had sworn to never feel again. Karga stood slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. What kind of things? Nathan stopped pacing and turned to face her fully. I have fallen in love with you, Karga. I tried to fight it, told myself it was too soon, that it was inappropriate, that you deserved better than a widower with a child and a settlement full of problems. But watching you walk into danger for the sake of people you barely knew, seeing your courage and your heart, I cannot deny it anymore. I love you. For a moment, Karga could not speak, could not breathe. Then words came tumbling out. I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, but I thought it was hopeless. I thought you could never see me as anything more than a friend. Nathan crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He took her hands in his grip warm and firm. I see you, Karga. I see your strength and your vulnerability, your fierce determination and your gentle heart. I see all of you and I love all of you. But your wife, Karga began. Talia will always be a part of me, a part of my past that helped make me who I am. But she is gone, and I am still here, still living. I think she would want me to be happy, to find love again. Nathan's voice dropped to a whisper. I want to build a life with you, Karga. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to raise Nessa together, and maybe even have more children if you want them. I want to face whatever challenges come our way as partners, if you will have me. Tears were streaming down Karga's face now, tears of joy she had never dared to hope for. Yes, she said, the word half sob, half laugh. Yes, I will have you. I want all of those things. I want to be part of your family, part of your life. Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Karga wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in her life, she felt truly home. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. Can I kiss you? In answer, Karga rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, an exploration and a question. Then it deepened, became more urgent, years of loneliness and longing pouring out in the simple act of connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, he whispered. Just to sleep with me holding you. I just want you close. Karga nodded, unable to find words for the overwhelming emotion swelling in her chest. They banked the fire and climbed into Nathan's bed, a simple frame with a straw mattress and warm blankets. Nathan pulled Karga against him, her back to his chest, his arms secure around her waist. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you too, Karga replied, lacing her fingers through his. She fell asleep feeling safer and more content than she ever had in her entire life. The next morning, Nessa's delighted squeal woke them both. The little girl had climbed down from the loft and discovered Karga in her father's bed. Karga stayed over, Nessa announced, bouncing on her toes. Does this mean you are going to get married like Mama and Papa did? Nathan laughed, sitting up and scooping his daughter into his arms. How would you feel about that, little one? If Karga became part of our family, Nessa considered this with great seriousness. Would she live with us? Eventually, yes. And would she help make breakfast sometimes? Because you make terrible porridge, Papa. Karga burst out laughing and Nathan looked affronted. My porridge is not that bad. It really is, Karga said with a grin, but I promise to make better porridge if you will have me. Nessa threw her arms around Karga's neck. Then I say yes. You can be my new mama. The easy acceptance of a child moved Karga to fresh tears. She hugged Nessa tight, looking over the little girl's head at Nathan. His eyes were wet too, his smile brighter than the morning sun. They made breakfast together, the three of them moving around the small kitchen in comfortable chaos. Nessa chattered nonstop, already making plans for all the things they would do as a family. Nathan caught Karga's hand whenever he passed her, small touches of affection and reassurance. After breakfast, Nathan suggested they make a formal announcement to the settlement. Karga felt nervous about the public nature of it, but she also understood the importance. In a place like Broken Pine, where relationships between humans and orcs were still controversial, being open and proud about their love mattered. They walked to the longhouse hand in hand, Nessa skipping ahead of them. Word spread quickly, and by the time they arrived, a crowd had gathered. Karga saw both friendly faces and skeptical ones, humans and orcs alike watching to see what would happen. Nathan stood before them, still holding Karga's hand, and spoke clearly. "I want to announce that Karga and I have decided to build a life together. We are going to be married, to form a family with my daughter Nessa. I hope we have the support and blessing of this community, but whether we do or not, this is our choice and our commitment to each other." There was a moment of silence. Then Greka, the orc elder, stepped forward. "You have my blessing. Karga has proven herself a valuable member of this settlement and a brave heart. I wish you both happiness." One by one, others added their voices. Some offered enthusiastic congratulations. Others gave more reserved approval. A few remained silent, their disapproval clear, but they did not speak against the union. The most moving moment came when an older human woman, someone Karga barely knew, approached and took her hands. "My son married an orc woman 5 years ago. They have 2 beautiful children. People like you and Nathan, you show others that it is possible to love across our divides. Thank you for having the courage to be visible." Over the following weeks, Karga moved her belongings into Nathan's cabin. It was a gradual process, combining 2 lives and 2 sets of possessions into one shared space. Nessa helped enthusiastically, insisting that Karga's tools and leather scraps have a special place in the corner where she liked to play. They set a date for the wedding, a simple ceremony to be held at the beginning of autumn. Both human and orc traditions would be incorporated, a symbol of the blending of their cultures. Nathan worked with the settlement council to plan a celebration that would bring the whole community together. But beneath the joy of their personal happiness, the shadow of larger problems remained. The temporary peace with the Blood Moon clan would not last forever. Other orc clans in the region were watching to see what would happen. And within Broken Pine itself, there were still those who questioned whether humans and orcs could truly coexist. One evening, about a month before the wedding, Nathan came home looking troubled. He kissed Karga in greeting and lifted Nessa into his arms, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "What is wrong?" Karga asked, setting aside the leather she had been tooling. Nathan waited until Nessa was occupied with her toys before answering. "I received a message from the regional governor today. He wants to send a military garrison to Broken Pine. For our protection, he says." Karga understood immediately why this was a problem. The orc clans will see that as an act of aggression. It will destroy any chance we have of maintaining peaceful relations. Exactly. But if I refuse the garrison, I risk angering the human authorities who technically have jurisdiction over this region. Either choice could destabilize everything we have built. Nathan sat heavily in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "I am trying to think of a third option, but I am not seeing one." Karga thought about the problem, turning it over from different angles. What if we proposed an alternative? Instead of a military garrison, What if we established a formal council with representatives from both human and orc communities? Something recognized by both the human authorities and the orc clans. It could serve as a neutral arbiter for disputes and a forum for ongoing negotiation. Nathan looked up, interest sparking in his eyes. A recognized diplomatic body rather than a military presence. That could work. It would give the human authorities oversight without the provocative presence of soldiers, and it might actually facilitate better communication with the orc clans. It would take a lot of negotiation to get all parties to agree, Karga cautioned, but it seems like it might be worth trying. Nathan reached out and pulled Karga into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "This is why I love you. You see solutions where I only see problems." Karga relaxed against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "We make a good team." "The best team," Nathan agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. The next several weeks were consumed with diplomatic efforts. Nathan sent carefully worded messages to the regional governor, to leaders of nearby human settlements, and to chiefs of the various orc clans in the region. Karga helped draft the proposals, her unique perspective as someone who had lived in both worlds proving invaluable. Slowly, grudgingly, various parties began to agree. The regional governor approved the plan on the condition that he could appoint one of the human representatives to the council. Several orc clans, weary of constant conflict, expressed cautious interest in a formal diplomatic framework. Even the Blood Moon chieftain sent a response, though hers was characteristically blunt. "I will send an observer to your council. If it proves useful, my clan may participate. If it proves to be a waste of time, we will resume raiding. Prove me wrong." It was not a ringing endorsement, but it was more than Karga had dared hope for. The formation of the Frontier Council, as it came to be called, was scheduled for mid-autumn, just 2 weeks after Karga and Nathan's wedding. The convergence of these two momentous events felt symbolic somehow, a personal union and a political one happening almost simultaneously. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the autumn air crisp with the promise of coming winter. Karga woke early in the cabin she had shared with Nathan for the past month, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. Greka and several other orc women arrived at dawn to help her prepare, a traditional orcish custom. They braided her dark hair with leather cords and painted ceremonial markings on her arms and face using dyes made from crushed berries and clay. The human women of Broken Pine contributed a dress, simple but beautiful, dyed a deep forest green that complemented Karga's skin. Looking at herself in the small mirror Nathan kept on the wall, Karga barely recognized the reflection. She looked like a bride, like someone on the threshold of a new life. Nathan was preparing with his own group of friends and supporters. Karga would not see him until the ceremony began, another tradition borrowed from human custom. The wedding was held in the central clearing of Broken Pine, beneath the open sky with the forest as witness. Benches had been arranged in a circle, and nearly every resident of the settlement attended. Human and orc sat side by side, united at least for this moment in celebration of love. Karga walked to the center of the circle accompanied by Greka, following the orcish tradition of being presented by an elder. Nathan was already there, looking handsome in clean leather breeches and a new linen shirt, his hair neatly combed, his eyes bright with emotion. Beside him stood Nessa, wearing a flower crown and carrying a small bouquet, beaming with pride at her role in the ceremony. An elderly human priest and Greka would co-officiate, another symbol of the blending of traditions. The priest spoke first, offering words about love and commitment and the courage it takes to build a life with another person. Then Greka spoke in the orcish tongue, her words translated by another elder for those who did not understand. She talked about the strength found in partnership, the honor in choosing someone to stand beside you in all of life's battles. When it came time for vows, Nathan took Karga's hands in his. His voice was steady and clear, carrying across the assembled crowd. Karga, you came to Broken Pine seeking a place to belong, but you gave me something I had stopped believing I could have again. Hope. Love. A future I actually want to wake up to. I promise to honor you, to stand beside you, to protect and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be a good father to any children we may have together and to always see you as the incredible, courageous woman you are. You are my partner, my love, my home. Tears streamed freely down Karga's face as she spoke her own vows. Nathan, you showed me that love does not see skin color or tusks or the boundaries we draw between peoples. You gave me a family, a purpose, a place to truly belong. I promise to stand beside you, to share your burdens and your joys, to help you build the future you dream of for Broken Pine and for Nessa, and for any children we may have. You are my heart, my home, my everything. They exchanged rings, simple bands of copper hammered by the settlement smith, and sealed their vows with a kiss that drew cheers and applause from the assembled crowd. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Broken Pine had ever seen. Food had been contributed by nearly every household, a mix of human and orcish dishes that covered long tables arranged in the clearing. There was music, humans playing fiddles and drums while orcs contributed their own rhythmic instruments. Children ran and played without regard for whether they were human or orc or somewhere in between. For one perfect day, the dream of Broken Pine felt completely real. As evening fell and the celebration began to wind down, Nathan and Karga slipped away to their cabin. Nessa had already been taken by Greca for the night, giving the newlyweds privacy. They entered their home hand in hand, the silence after the noise of the celebration almost startling. Nathan turned to Karga, his expression tender. "How are you feeling, wife?" The words sent a thrill through Karga. Wife. She was someone's wife. She belonged to Nathan and he belonged to her, a chosen bond that no one could break. "Happy," she said simply. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." He pulled her close and she went willingly into his embrace. They stood together in the dimness of their cabin, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. "I love you," Nathan murmured against her hair. "I love you too," Karga replied. That night, they made love for the first time, a gentle exploration of each other's bodies, of pleasure given and received. It was tender and sometimes awkward and absolutely perfect. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in their bed, Karga's head on Nathan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," Nathan said quietly into the darkness. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me, on us. For believing that what we have is worth fighting for." Karga propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at her husband's face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "You gave me everything I was searching for. A home, a family, a place where I belong. I should be thanking you." "Then we will thank each other," Nathan said with a smile, pulling her down for another kiss. The days following the wedding were busy with preparations for the first meeting of the Frontier Council. Representatives began arriving from various human settlements and orc clans, each bringing their own agendas and suspicions. Nathan and Karga worked tirelessly to make everyone feel welcome, to create an atmosphere where genuine dialogue might be possible. The first council meeting was tense. Representatives sat around a massive circular table that had been built specifically for this purpose, each group eyeing the others warily. The human governor's appointee, a stern man named Lord Ashford, made clear his skepticism about the entire endeavor. The Blood Moon Observer, A scarred warrior named Ragnak seemed equally doubtful, but Nathan was patient and persistent. He facilitated discussions about trade routes and resource sharing. He mediated disputes over land boundaries and hunting rights. Slowly, grudgingly, the representatives began to actually talk to each other instead of just exchanging threats and demands. Karga attended the meetings as Nathan's partner and advisor, offering insights from her unique perspective. She found herself translating not just words but cultural contexts, helping each side understand the motivations and concerns of the other. The breakthrough came on the third day of discussions. A dispute had arisen over a stretch of forest that both a human settlement and an orc clan claimed. Tempers were rising, and it looked like the council might dissolve into the same old pattern of conflict. Then Karga stood up. "May I suggest something?" Nathan nodded for her to continue. The room fell silent, all eyes on the orc woman who had married a human. "What if we stopped thinking about land as something to fight over and started thinking about it as something to share? The forest in question is large enough to support both the human loggers and the orc hunters. What if we divided it into zones, some for logging, some for hunting, and some kept wild for future generations? And what if we established rules that both groups helped create and both groups agreed to enforce?" Lord Ashford frowned. "Humans and orcs sharing resources, actually cooperating. That is unprecedented." "Then let us set a precedent," Karga said quietly. "Let us prove that it can be done." Ragnak, the Blood Moon observer, surprised everyone by nodding slowly. "The woman speaks sense. The Blood Moon clan has no claim to this particular forest, but the principle is sound. Resources shared are resources preserved." The discussion that followed was long and detailed, but by the end of the day, an agreement had been reached. It was a small victory, just one forest and one compromise, but it felt monumentous. Humans and orcs had solved a problem together instead of fighting over it. As the council adjourned for the evening, representatives from both sides approached Karga and Nathan to express cautious optimism. This could work. It was difficult and frustrating and required more patience than anyone wanted to exercise, but it could actually work. That night, back in their cabin with Nessa asleep in the loft, Nathan pulled Karga into a tight embrace. "You realize what you did today?" he asked, his voice full of pride and wonder. "I made a suggestion," Karga said, embarrassed by his intensity. "You showed them a path forward. You embodied the very thing we are trying to build here, someone who understands both perspectives and can find the common ground. You were incredible." Karga buried her face in Nathan's shoulder, overwhelmed by emotion. "I just want this to work. For us, for Nessa, for everyone trying to build something better. It is working. Slowly, imperfectly, but it is working, and a lot of that is because of you." The Frontier Council continued to meet over the following weeks, addressing one thorny issue after another. Not every discussion ended in agreement. There were walkouts and angry arguments and moments when it seemed like the whole fragile structure would collapse. But each time, the participants came back to the table, choosing dialogue over violence. Winter arrived, bringing cold winds and early snow. The season also brought the first real test of the new agreements. Food grew scarce in the mountains where the Blood Moon clan made their winter camp, and some of the younger warriors advocated for raiding human settlements for supplies. But instead of attacking, the Blood Moon chieftain sent a message to the Frontier Council. "We need food. What will you offer in trade?" It was a revolutionary moment. Orcs asking to trade instead of simply taking. The council worked frantically to put together a supply convoy, humans and orcs collaborating to gather food, blankets, and other winter necessities. Karga volunteered to be part of the group delivering the supplies, despite Nathan's concerns for her safety. "I have to go," she explained to her husband as she packed supplies. "I am the one they know, the one who first approached them in peace. My presence matters." Nathan knew she was right, but that did not make it easier to watch her leave, especially now that he knew she was pregnant with their first child together. They had discovered the pregnancy just a week earlier, and both were overjoyed but also apprehensive about bringing a child into such an uncertain world. Karga made the journey to the Blood Moon winter camp with an escort of guards, both human and orc. The chieftain received them with the same blunt hospitality as before, accepting the supplies without excessive gratitude but also without hostility. "You keep your word," the old orc said to Karga. "That is rare in these times among humans or orcs. I am beginning to think your broken pine may survive longer than I predicted." "We hope to do more than survive," Karga said respectfully. "We hope to thrive, and we hope others might join us in building something new." The chieftain snorted. "Do not get ahead of yourself, girl. But perhaps, come spring, I will send more than just an observer to your council. Perhaps I will send someone with authority to make real agreements. We shall see." It was the closest thing to approval Karga could hope for from the Blood Moon clan. She returned to Broken Pine with the news, arriving just before a major snowstorm that would close the passes for months. Winter in Broken Pine was harsh, but also strangely peaceful. With travel nearly impossible, the settlement turned inward, focusing on survival and community. Karga and Nathan spent long evenings by the fire with Nessa, telling stories and making plans for the spring. Karga's pregnancy progressed, her belly swelling with new life, a visible symbol of the future they were building. The settlement rallied around the pregnant woman who had become something of a symbol for them all. Human women shared wisdom about childbirth and infant care. Orc women contributed their own traditions and remedies. Karga felt surrounded by support and love in a way she had never experienced growing up. Nessa was thrilled about the coming baby, already planning all the things she would teach her little brother or sister. She patted Karga's belly every morning and talked to the baby, telling it about all the wonders of Broken Pine. "You are going to love it here," Nessa would say solemnly. "We have friends who are humans and friends who are orcs, and everyone works together. And you have the best papa and the best mama in the whole world." Nathan and Karga would exchange glances over Nessa's head, their hearts full of love for this child who took their blended family as the most natural thing in the world. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Karga went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, complicated by the fact that the child was large, taking after Nathan's human size rather than the smaller builds of orc infants. For hours, Karga labored in their cabin, supported by Greka and the settlement's midwife, while Nathan paced anxiously outside. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Karga collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant. "A son," Greka announced, carrying the squalling infant to Nathan. "Big and healthy and loud, just like his mother." Nathan cradled his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. The baby had dark hair like Nathan and skin that was a pale sage green, slightly lighter than Karga's. His ears were slightly pointed, and when he opened his eyes, they were Nathan's same gray-blue. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, bringing the baby to Karga. "You did so well. He is absolutely perfect." Karga took her son in her arms, staring down at the tiny face with overwhelming love. This was her child, hers and Nathan's, a living embodiment of the love that had brought them together. A half-orc, half-human baby who would grow up in a world where such things were becoming normal, even celebrated. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked softly. Karga thought about it, looking down at the baby who was already quieting in her arms, his tiny hand grasping her finger with surprising strength. Tauren, she said finally. It means chief in the old orcish tongue, but it sounds human enough too. A name that belongs to both worlds. Tauren, Nathan repeated, testing the sound. Tauren Whitmore, I love it. Nessa was allowed in shortly after, and she climbed carefully onto the bed to meet her new brother. She touched his tiny hand with one finger, her expression awed. Hi, Tauren, she whispered. I am your big sister. I am going to teach you everything. The baby made a small sound, almost like agreement, and everyone laughed. Word of Tauren's birth spread quickly through Broken Pine, and over the following days the cabin was filled with visitors bringing gifts and congratulations. The baby became a symbol of hope, proof that the next generation could be different, could belong to a world where human and orc were not enemies but partners. As spring advanced and the mountain passes reopened, the Frontier Council resumed its meetings. And just as the Blood Moon chieftain had suggested, she sent a full representative this time, someone with the authority to make binding agreements on behalf of the clan. Slowly, painfully, the framework of lasting peace began to take shape. Karga attended the council meetings with Tauren in a sling against her chest, nursing him during breaks in the discussions. Some found it shocking at first, but Karga refused to be separated from her infant, and eventually it became just another aspect of how the new world they were building functioned. Women did not have to choose between motherhood and participation in public life. They could do both. One afternoon, nearly 6 months after Tauren's birth, Karga and Nathan sat on their porch watching Nessa play in the yard while Tauren napped in his cradle. The summer air was warm and sweet, carrying the sounds of the settlement going about its daily life. You ever regret it? Nathan asked quietly. Leaving the human city, coming to the frontier, all of this. Karga turned to look at her husband, this man who had given her everything she had ever dreamed of and more. Not for a single moment. This is exactly where I am meant to be. Nathan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I think about that day you walked into Broken Pine, so determined and so scared at the same time. I had no idea that you would change my life, would change this entire settlement, would help build something that I think might actually last. We built it together, Karga corrected gently. You, me, everyone here who chooses cooperation over conflict every single day. Together, Nathan agreed, pulling her close. Always together. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Karga reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had left the human city seeking a mate, looking for someone who would accept her, who would build a life with her. But she had found so much more than that. She had found a home in Broken Pine, a place where her mixed existence as an orc raised among humans was not a weakness but a strength, a bridge between two worlds. She had found a purpose in helping to build and maintain peace between peoples who had been enemies for generations. She had found a family in Nathan and Nessa, and now Tauren, people who loved her exactly as she was. And perhaps most importantly, she had found herself. Not the slave she had been in the human city, not the lost girl trying to find where she belonged, but a woman of strength and courage and compassion. A mother, a wife, a diplomat, a peacemaker. All of these things and more. Nessa ran up to the porch, flushed and happy from her play. Can we have dinner soon? I am starving. Karga laughed and stood, ready to help prepare the evening meal for her family. Of course, sweetheart. Let me wake your brother and we will eat together. As they moved into the warm cabin, the four of them together, Karga felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what she had been searching for all along, not just a mate, but a family. Not just a place to live, but a true home. Not just acceptance, but belonging. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments when the fragile peace they had built seemed ready to shatter. But Karga had learned that the most worthwhile things in life required constant effort, constant choosing to do the hard work of understanding and cooperation. And she would face those challenges the same way she had faced everything else since coming to Broken Pine, with Nathan beside her, their children around them, and a community of humans and orcs working together to build something better. As night fell over the frontier settlement, lights began to glow in the windows of cabins and tents, human and orc families settling in for the evening. From the longhouse came the sound of laughter and music, another community gathering where people of all backgrounds came together to share food and stories. Karga stood at her window, Torin in her arms, watching the peaceful scene. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around both of them. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Beyond measure," Karga replied, leaning back against his chest. Outside, Broken Pine thrived, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the simple choice to see each other as people rather than enemies. And at the heart of it all stood an orc girl who had been raised among humans, who had returned to the frontier seeking a mate, and who had found instead a family, a home, and a future worth fighting for. The story of Karga and Nathan would be told for generations in Broken Pine, becoming part of the settlement's founding mythology. But for them, it was simply their life, filled with the ordinary joys and challenges of raising children, maintaining relationships, and working toward a better world. And that, Karga reflected as she kissed her son's soft head and felt Nathan's arms secure around her, was more than enough. It was everything. Years would pass. Torin would grow strong and clever, a natural leader who would eventually take a prominent role in the Frontier Council. Nessa would become a healer, using her unique position as someone accepted by both humans and orcs to bring medical care to communities across the frontier. Karga and Nathan would have 2 more children, a daughter and another son, each adding to the beautiful tapestry of their blended family. The Frontier Council would expand, adding more settlements and more clans, creating a network of peace and cooperation that would eventually encompass a significant portion of the region. There would be setbacks and conflicts, but the foundation laid by those early pioneers would prove strong enough to weather the storms. And through it all, Karga and Nathan would stand together, their love a constant in a changing world. They would grow old together, watching their children and grandchildren carry on the work they had started. They would sit on their porch on warm summer evenings, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the settlement that had become so much more than either of them had dared to dream. But that was the future. In this moment, in this perfect evening with her family around her and peace settling over her hard-won home, Karga simply existed in gratitude. She had come to the frontier alone, uncertain, searching for something she could barely name, and she had found everything. The end of the story was really just the beginning of their life together, a life that would be filled with love and challenges, and the daily choice to keep building bridges instead of walls. But every great journey starts with a single step, and Karga's step into the frontier, her courage to seek something better, had changed not just her own life, but the lives of countless others. As she finally turned from the window and helped Nathan serve dinner to their hungry children, as she listened to Nessa chatter about her day and felt Torin's small hand patting her arm, Karga knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. She had come home. And home, she had learned, was not a place but the people you loved and who loved you in return. It was the work you did together, the dreams you built together, the future you created together. Broken Pine was home, Nathan was home. Their children were home. And Karga, the orc girl raised among humans who had returned to the frontier seeking a mate, had finally and completely found where she belonged in the end. That was all any of us could hope for. To find our place, to find our people, to find our purpose. And to have the courage to fight for it, protect it, and nurture it into something that would outlast us all. Karga had found all of that and more. And as she sat down to dinner with her family, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of many more days just like this one, she smiled. She was home, she was loved, she belonged, and that made all the difference.